Thank you all for joining. My name is Darren Hermans. I'm a product manager in the Enterprise Wireless Group at Cambium Networks. Today we're going to be talking about wireless technology and understanding how we can use it. We traditionally think of wireless as a Wi-Fi connection. You know, I connect my smartphone, my tablet, laptop, but it's also used to deliver multi-gigabit backhaul in a wireless broadband technology. It's been doing that for many, many years. With new technology that's recently become available, we're now exceeding gigabit speeds in that wireless broadband. And so now we can say with a certain degree of confidence that wireless broadband is a fiber equivalent technology. It's wired equivalency, but at a fraction of the deployment time. Doesn't mean fiber is going away anytime soon. It certainly is a key technology. But let's talk about where and when we can use fixed wireless broadband, or we can use Wi-Fi Mesh, and what are some of the challenges with those two technologies. Today we have two experts with us in the wireless broadband and Wi-Fi markets. These individuals have experienced all the joys and frustrations. We were just chatting before this podcast and some of our history and background, and come to find out we've been crawling on rooftops for about 20 years each. So I think between the three of us, we probably have more than 60 years of crawling on the rooftops and looking at wireless backhaul. Let's go ahead and introduce them. Drew, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Darren, I don't know if that's something to be proud of. I'm sure we've got the sunburns and the tan line, you know, the farmer tan lines to show it around our arms. My name is Drew Lentz. I'm one of the co-founders and the lead solution architect for Frontera Consulting. We're a boutique wireless consulting firm located down in the very southern tip of South Texas.
Fantastic, Drew. Thank you for being here. Gino, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Darren. My name is Gino Valorini. I'm the founder and CEO of Aeronet Wireless Broadband. We're a wireless ISP, or fixed wireless access provider, down in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
So we got some people here from a wide variety of backgrounds and experience, both Gino, well, on your side, sort of managing the go-to-market as well as the technology. It's a great viewpoint to have on this. And then Drew, boy, I tell you, just nothing like starting to the designs. So Drew, I'll start with you actually. First question here. You talked about your background. I'd like to hear your background a little bit in fixed wireless broadband. You mentioned Frontera Wireless. What is your background with fixed wireless broadband? When did you start with that? Is there a timeline that we could look at?
When I was a young warthog, a long time ago, I was fascinated with microwave. I was fascinated with AM radio. I would stay up late at night and tune in AM radio to see what stations I could find and how far off I could find them. And I would write them down. And, I was always, again, fascinated with wireless. And so a bunch of years back, I'm not even sure which specific year it was, but with some AlohaNet stuff, some of the old Wave IP, I started messing with wireless to deliver broadband. My background's in building internet service providers with dial-up internet service providers, broadband service providers. And when this whole thing with wireless started to come about, where you could use it for data transfer to connect people to the internet, that's really when I started to get serious about it. Went out and got my amateur radio operator's license, became a certified nerd with a ham call sign, KE5ZJO, just in case anyone is out there. But, I really started to look at what I could do with transmitting data across wireless. And so from a point-to-point perspective, down here in South Texas, again, we've got flat terrain, which was really cool to work with, especially with wireless. And it allowed us to do huge shots. I remember one time doing a 15-mile 2.4 gig shot using two Linksys access points and big antennas. And I mean, with point-to-point, I've done a lot either in the carrier space with transmitting either TDM at the time or DS3s, all the way to gigabit. Now doing lots of gigabit microwave, point-to-point, point-to-multipoint microwave. But where I really had a lot of fun, I cut my teeth in the multipoint side, was deploying some of the pre-WiMAX stuff right when Canopy was first getting started, deploying lots of Canopy equipment out there, and then going on to work at some different manufacturing and consultancies across the globe to help them figure out how to best deploy point-to-multipoint solutions. So big background in doing this, building wireless internet service providers, building service providers for counties and cities and municipalities. But just love it. I love transmitting data across the airwaves. It's a lot of fun.
Drew, I could see you as a little kid with a little crystal AM radio, probably bought it on the back of the the back page of the comic book.
Radio Shack, sir. Radio Shack.
I was a member of when I was like, I remember being 10 years old, being the Battery Club member of Radio Shack, and I'd ride my bicycle down there, and the guy hated to see me once a month coming there. I have my free battery card. Yeah. It would take me 6 months to get enough batteries to fill the big flashlight that Radio Shack would give you for free.
I couldn't wait to get that catalog though. I mean, that was like that was my go-to rag, man. Between the Beckett sports card deal and the Radio Shack catalog, man. I mean, that was the cat's meow when I was a kid.
I got it. All right, Gino. So with Aeronet, what's your background, personal background or company background with fixed wireless?
Well, both, and pretty similar to Drew's. My father used to own a two-way radio and paging company, so I grew up kind of in the environment and just working with two-way radios and FM radios, AM radios, CB radios, and stuff like that. So, and also kind of climbing small towers and so it's kind of, I'm pretty familiar with that type of stuff. And then after I went to college, graduation, I married and I had a small enterprise. I helped a friend start a dial-up ISP back in 1996. So I kind of dipped my feet in that kind of knowledge base. And then I moved to a new place, and that place where I moved didn't have any sort of internet connection. So I started to research how can I bring internet connection to my home, and I started to dip into maybe we can do this wirelessly, and start to dig on the internet and start to research and stumble until with some pretty let's say nascent industry where some equipment was being manufactured but was pretty expensive, and then there were some options that you could have your own and put some software into. Back in the day, it was called Aeronet and a software that you can run on some cards. So just put the two and two together, put some equipment together, and was able to beam internet to my home. And by doing that, then all my neighbors wanted it, and then that's basically how the business started. I decided to sell my other business that I was dealing with, a retail cellular store. I was selling cellular phones and pagers, and I decided to sell that and just take on the opportunity and move into providing internet servers wirelessly. So I started as a one-man shop, doing all the installs myself, climbing roofs, putting all the equipment together because I couldn't afford the high expensive equipment. But maybe I would say like 2 years into that, I realized that if I wanted to grow the company, I needed to standardize on some sort of equipment that will allow me to grow and take the advantages of having a standardized solution. So then at that time, there's maybe 2001 and 2002, Motorola Canopy came by. We tried equipment. It was a little bit out of our budget, but we decided it was the correct decision. And 20 years later, here we are. Still connecting wireless, and as Drew said, just pushing some data wirelessly. So that's we love it too. So,
well, the best businesses are just grown out of just seeing a need and fill the need, and we do have need. We've had need for a long time. It's been 25 plus years. We have a need for broadband access. We need to get data. We need it for data, for interactions with other people. We need it for all sorts of things, education, healthcare. It's just the list goes on. So we've been talking a bit about our backgrounds and experience. In the title of this, we're talking about fixed wireless broadband and Wi-Fi mesh. So let's do a quick definition, sort of a very high level architecture of fixed wireless broadband and mesh to help the listener sort of get in tune with what we're talking about. So Drew, how would you describe fixed wireless broadband? Is there sort of hub spoke type technology? What do you think about fixed wireless broadband?
Yeah, the way I think about it, I think about utilities, and I try and describe everything as a utility service. When you think about a water tower and you think about the way that water tower delivers water all throughout a neighborhood, that's the same thing as fixed wireless broadband in a sense. You have one central location that deploys wireless access all across the board. It's like a transmitter station, and you have all these different locations that can dial into it, or to use an old term, but to call back into it and connect to it. So fixed wireless broadband to me is either a point-to-point connection or a point-to-multipoint connection. It's a fixed location communicating from point A to B, or from point A to B to C to D to E. So that's why I think about fixed
So
wireless.
good. So you introduced, and we'll come back to that those a little bit later as we talk about the network design process. But point to point, so wireless can be a bridge. We can go from water tower to water tower and transmit high-speed data point to point. And the other one you mentioned is point to multipoint, where one device then connects to multiple endpoint devices. All right, so this is our fixed wireless broadband short definition. Gino, if I asked you to tell me what is Wi-Fi mesh, that's something a lot of people know about. A lot of people have Wi-Fi mesh in their home, perhaps, and they may have that in their mind. But when it comes to the network deployment, how would you describe Wi-Fi mesh?
Well, it's a type of technology that's used to quickly, I will say, quickly deploy some sort of last mile access to the end user, and the end user being one that has a Wi-Fi compatible device. So you have a situation where you need to quickly deploy access to a certain area. You use Wi-Fi mesh, and Wi-Fi mesh is a couple of Wi-Fi devices. It could be two or more that interconnects each other through usually the same radio that is used to access the end user. Sometimes you have a second radio to take care of the inter-node connection. And that's basically what I will define as Wi-Fi mesh. Wi-Fi mesh has some, and it has a long history. And so for some time, maybe it wasn't even a bad word because some sort of performance issues that you will find with deploying that kind of technology. But I think that nowadays you have to evolve into a good tool to have available in your toolbox.
Excellent. So you gave us a really critical statement in there that with Wi-Fi mesh, generally you are using the same radio to replicate the signal for connecting between access points, hopping between access points, and connecting client devices using the same radio in most cases. And so and therein lies both the advantage of Wi-Fi mesh, and in some cases it's Achilles heel, right? In some cases the pros and the con are both embedded in that same statement. So we have two technologies here: fixed wireless broadband. Let's first focus on the point to multipoint aspect of that, where one access point connects up multiple client devices, and then we'll talk about Wi-Fi mesh. So obviously these two technologies exist, and they have a reason to exist. There's a logical reason for each of these technologies to exist. So when you guys get a network request, somebody says, you know what, we have this project, we want to do this. What's your first thoughts in your mind, how you evaluate whether you want to use fixed wireless broadband, so maybe a point to multipoint link, mixture with some other types of links, or use Wi-Fi mesh, or God forbid, even maybe use fiber?
You know, when I
shouldn't say that, but go ahead, Drew.
No, when I get these requests, what I look at is I always like to think about surgeon, different types of scalpels, right? And when you go in and you need something, rarely ever is there one single fit, right? There's not one piece of equipment that can do everything that's being requested. So I like to look at the whole scope of what that request is from the customer and really determine what the best type of technology is that can service that request overall. Like I deal with a lot of cities and municipalities, and in those, sometimes the best connection, if you're doing a downtown area, is to do some really high speed point to multipoint. Whereas if you're doing neighborhoods, maybe mesh works to get into the neighborhoods, or maybe it's a combination of the two, where you use high speed to feed into the mesh, or you have point to multipoint coming down from a water tower to blanket over an entire area. And then that connects in the high speed stuff underneath the canopy, and maybe there's some mesh that goes into it. But I don't really think that there's one answer for all of them. It's all dependent upon the total objective of what your customer is trying to do. And I think that a lot of times wireless, folks tend to get pigeonholed into thinking that one is better than the other. And I think that a good combination of all of them, including fiber, the dirty word in the wireless industry, including fiber, is something that really helps. It's about leveraging what you have and using it to the best of its ability. And I think that that's something that gets lost a lot. Wi-Fi isn't really good for everything. The IoT stuff, the 900 megahertz stuff isn't really good for everything, but they all serve their purposes to create that entire solution for a customer. And I think we need to keep focus on that.
That's why we call it a network. That's where the name the internet came from, right? The fact that there is no single
Exactly.
technology. So Gino, what are you looking at in this type of question when you first want to evaluate these technologies? Gino, what sort of factors do you think in your line of work really is important to look at?
Yes, as a fixed wireless access provider, it's mainly defined by the area that we want to cover with services and what kind of speeds you want to offer. We deal more with fixed wireless technology, multipoint, whereas in a certain area you want to offer some sort of speeds that are kind of in the range of 100 megs. You want to provide 1 gig of service, so there's several technologies that you can use and you can leverage to provide the service that you're looking for. So as Drew said, you have different scaples to go into surgery or different tools on your toolbox. So, for example, if you want to provide services near 1 gigabit per second in a multiple environment, you have certain tools like the CN Wave. That's a new technology from Cambium and 60 gigahertz, which utilize a mix, let's say, of mesh technology with fixed wireless access, and then you can go and deploy that in a really dense area. Whereas if you need to provide services in a scarcely populated area or a rural area, you have to go with a tool like fixed wireless, traditional fixed wireless tools. So, but for example, if you have a customer that is asking for a temporary service or a special event service in an event, then you have to go with a Wi-Fi system because it's easier and faster to deploy. It's going to be used for a while, a couple of days, and the end users will be using most of the time cell phones or tablets to access the internet. So on that case, Wi-Fi mesh makes the whole sense. Whereas fixed wireless doesn't fit that model. So it's a real evaluation of what you want to achieve, what speeds you want to achieve, what's the density of the area, and the size of the area.
And then
Thank
to
you. And
piggyback
you,
off of what Gina was saying, I think when you look at the environment, first of all, the big questions that come to mind are, well, is there a need for high speed, or will low speed suffice? Is there line of sight? Is there non-line of sight? Are there obstructions? Are there no obstructions? And then most importantly, Gino, what you pointed out, I think is super important to always remember is, what is the client device going to be?
Mhm.
Is it going to be someone using Wi-Fi at the end of the pipe, or is it something where you're going to be connecting something via Ethernet? So
Right.
I really think the combination of understanding that environment, the physical environment, along with the needs and what that end user device is, I think those are really important parts. I'm glad you brought those up.
yeah, I like that as well. As you guys are talking, I'm thinking about the process, that's required to deploy that network, to architect the network, pull in all that data, collect all that data, then make a
Mhm.
decision, and then do that deployment. And so your deployment time actually becomes also one of those factors, doesn't it?
Right, definitely. It's actually is one of the most important factors. In the business of fixed wireless and the WIS business, you have a market that you need to provide services, and since it's a pretty competitive business, if you don't provide the service quickly enough, then another competitor might come in and snoop up all the customers. So it's very time sensitive
That's
equation.
right. Your competitors aren't sitting resting.
And
Exactly.
one thing I would add to that, Gino, unfortunately, you and I both live along, you live in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, and I live right on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico. And one of the things that we know all too well is emergency response, emergency disaster
Hmm.
aid, network resilience, things like that,
Exactly.
that a lot of times speed isn't the issue just from a competitive perspective. But when we have infrastructure that fails, or infrastructure that goes down, or infrastructure that's underneath water or doesn't work because there's not electricity, a lot of times wireless tends to be a solution. I want to give you kudos to everything that you've done there in Puerto Rico over the last couple of years. I mean, the whole wireless industry's watched what you've done over there, and it's fantastic. But
Thank you.
being
Appreciate it.
able to quickly respond in an emergency isn't just reserved for people like us on the Gulf
Hmm.
Coast, or in the Gulf. Everywhere you're looking, whether any type of natural disaster can knock out so much infrastructure so
Hmm.
quickly. And usually, the number one way to get that infrastructure back online is a very quick wireless link. So speed to market, or speed to
Exactly.
availability for this is, I think it's essential when it comes to what we're doing. And like I say to a lot of my customers, they always ask the fiber question.
Mhm.
Well, why shouldn't I just build out fiber? And I say, you know what? Build out wireless now. Solve your problem now. Get it done today. Get a solution in front of whoever you're trying to get that solution in front of. And when you have the time and the budget to bring that fiber in, now you have a wireless backup. Now you have a resilient network. Now you have a redundant network, so you can serve both purposes with that.
That's nice. I appreciate you guys talking about the emergency response teams, and it's actually something that we have seen in Puerto Rico, other places of the world. A big need in terms of natural disasters, but even the pandemic, this COVID-19 was a disaster, an event that we certainly did not expect, and no one could have planned for that to the degree that we needed to. And so this need for these emergency response networks actually occurred and is occurring now in many parts of the world in terms of getting access to data, putting in remote clinics, medical clinics in remote rural facilities, and they need access to data. They need access to hard data. They need to do reporting, access to test results. You have to set up a network. It has to be stood up, and it has to be stood up quickly in a day or two. You have to have that network up and running. And so this concept of these emergency response networks is something that we need to explore more.
And I think, Darren, one of the projects that we just came off of that we got a lot of, great spotlight on was dealing with the response to the pandemic, not just from the emergency disaster perspective, but the disaster that's happening in our schools and our cities and our disconnected nation. And so, like when we got approached here by the city of McAllen and we stood up 1,000 nodes, 1,000 access points, 1,000 CBRS endpoints, 24 base stations in less than 60 days. It was one of those things that gave us the opportunity to get into our community quickly, get our students back online so that they could, continue their education, get our workforce back online, get our stores and shops online so that they didn't lose some of that sales tax. It was that side of the emergency where we've seen so much growth also. So it's been really neat to see how these networks have been repurposed to connect the disconnected at the same time solving those emergency issues.
Go try that with fiber.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, you guys are really hitting on some points that all of us can relate to. And before this podcast, Drew and I were talking about our kids and their impact, and certainly that educational impact in the past year has been huge, and it is a national emergency. So let's just use that as a segue. So we talked about some of the advantages of wireless in both emergency response as well. Gino, you talked about just setting up your business and making sure that when you service an area, you have to be up and running quickly, and the design aspects have to be done timely. Time to market is a key thing. We talked about that.
Definitely.
So in this decision process, what technology should I use? The network design process, the pre-site survey process, all of these things that you do almost even before boots hit the ground and you start turning screws, as they used to say. In your recent experience, what are some of the tools that you found effective?
Well, to be frank, I love Google Earth, especially if you have LiDAR data available. It allows you to see 3D renditions of all the environment from your desk. And that saves times. There's nothing that can replace an actual site survey, going to the tower, going to a field, taking measurements, field pictures and everything, and collecting data that you need, the hard data that you need on the field. But you can replace about half of that stuff of just using tools like Google Earth from your desk. So I'm loving it for been using it for a while now. But now we found also a great tool from Cambium, the See and Heat. And man, we're loving the See and Heat. It allowed us to pinpoint exactly where we need to install our customers in an area that we cover, and the accuracy of it is stellar. So we're falling in love with it too. So we're using it a lot for actually not for planning the deployments of our infrastructure, but to pinpoint exactly if a customer has a line of sight or has probable service with near line of sight, and actually deploying our installers, our technicians, and going there and knowing where to install the equipment, how tall needs to be installed, and what type of equipment they will need to in order to achieve the speeds or service quality that our customers wants.
I second that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up See and Heat, and as a tool. I had kind of forgotten to mention that. It's our own product. It's a great tool. Combining that LiDAR data, and so it gives you that. And then also with Google Earth, you also mentioned Google Earth. Yep. So that helps you in the pre-design phases so that your technicians on site are more efficient because they understand elevation, where the antennas need to be deployed. They understand before they go on site the most likely best spot. And of course they can validate that when they get on site, but it gives them helps them to wrap up that network design phase very quickly. Drew, if you can tell us something informative and interesting. So far, Drew, you're riding Gino's coattails here.
Listen, so he's right on. I mean, he's right on. And heat. Oh my gosh. So my background in working in the propagation modeling industry, I've worked for a company that does that. I ran business dev for us, and I've used it. I mean, I've used some of the most amazing tools that are out there in the industry to do propagation modeling, whether it's the really high end stuff or the free stuff that's out there available. I've got a passion for trying to find the right tool to do it. And so I was real skeptical when heat came out. I was like, oh, okay, we'll see how it goes. And so I sent everything in and I got it mapped and it came back, and it really blew me away. It's such a cool product. I can't wait for other integrations with it, but it worked. The accuracy of it was key. And as Gino mentioned, it's really for determining if there's serviceability in an area or not. And I think, if anyone's a wireless ISP or any type of operator and they're trying to figure out, will this customer meet the qualifications or not, you put in a couple of settings in there and it does an extremely good job letting you know if that serviceability is actually, there. What we did with Google Earth here locally in some of our installations is we started to leverage not just Google Earth, but Google Earth in virtual reality. And we found that not just being able to see the rooftops of it, but bringing in Street View, when we could bring Street View into VR, we were doing, we had to check a whole bunch of poles, these, utility poles. And we said, okay, well, do these poles have primary circuits or secondary circuits? Do they have lights on them? Do they not have lights on them? And instead of sending someone out to drive all around the city to check them, we could sit there in our office and put on our VR headset, and we could look and see and do some of that pre-qualification work from our lab. We posted a real cool picture of it while it was happening, because it was a great way for us to intertwine those technologies to see how we could leverage something like AR VR along with what we're doing to save time, to save money, to speed our installation process up. And it worked extremely well for us. And so ever since then, what we've done as a standard practice is we carry 360 cameras with us. So whenever we go out to do a site survey, we don't just take photos, static imagery photos of what's happening, but we always snap a couple of 360 photos. And that way we're able to go back in VR and see if there's something we missed, or a screenshot that we needed, or a location installation, to see if there's an electrical outlet there, or see if there's a wire above us. So now we're really starting to leverage that. And it's really cool because it's so helpful, and it's got such a crazy cool factor to it. When we go sit down with some of these different municipalities, we can actually show them on the headset where those connections are going to be. We can overlay connection information. All I'm waiting for now is if I can get link planner files into Google Earth, into VR, then we've got a real cool product to look at. Oh, so man, that's where we're hoping it all goes.
Well, Drew, you sound like a Cambium insider. So you're using terms that most people aren't going to know about. So tell us, what is link planner?
So link planner is one of the this sucks because I sound like super fanboy, right? But the thing is that link planner, since it first got started, has been this tool that's like extremely essential when it comes to mapping out these networks. And it started with Orthogon before the point-to-point stuff with before the Cambium acquisition even. But link planner is a freely available tool that works with the Cambium infrastructure, or the Cambium ecosystem, where you can go in and you can map your network out. You can bring in locations via Google Earth, via KML or KMZ. You can drop them in there. You can specify what type of equipment you're using, what your tower heights are, where all the infrastructure is, what the level of service that you're looking for to each one of those locations are. And you can generate installation reports, field reports, propagation reports. You can get a full view of what your network's going to look like overall. And it includes the terrain data. It includes rain data, all this great information to help you really build an accurately designed network. And it's totally free, which is awesome. I think it's definitely a market advantage for Cambium, but it doesn't give you the feel that you're working with a free tool. I mean, it's such a well thought out piece of software. that's constantly updated, sometimes too often it feels like, with every single piece of equipment that either Cambium manufactures or Cambium partners with or Cambium works with. And from the export side, you can export to KML, export to KMZ. You can crank out some really cool maps with it. And on top of that, you can also generate bills of material. It's kind of a one-stop shop to designing a network. So I would, for anyone that's interested in Cambium who hasn't used it, I think if you're just dipping your toes in the water with it, you need to go through the Cambium University training for Link Planner, because it all starts there. All your design, all your engineering, everything starts in Link Planner. And from there, it's really going to help you understand the way it all fits together. Wow. Not to sound like a Link Planner commercial, but
no, I mentioned at the beginning that my experience is at Cambium. I'm a manager in the enterprise Wi-Fi group, but I don't touch enough the fixed wireless broadband. So listening to you guys has been a real treat and pleasure for me, and I'm learning some things as well. So let's kind of wrap up this final result here. Let's look at how try to pull some of these things together. We actually did not talk about Wi-Fi, which is okay because that's a whole new topic. That's another reason to come back, right? So we talked about fixed wireless broadband, some of the deployment issues. We talked about a little description of how it works, and some of the tools that you guys use to do your designs. And as you were talking, the word kind of kept popping into my head is efficiency. Mm-hmm. Efficiency. You are very efficient about how you do your designs. So for time to market issues, time to results issues, as well as get the best performance possible. And I love that. I love that concept of efficiency, and I think that's something we can focus on, help people to get better at, right? We can all improve on efficiency and productivity. So some of the tools you use this Cambium Link Planner, which is really that outdoor fixed broadband. It's your starting point, helps you to plan out all those long links. You use Cambium C and Heat. Heat's a product that gives you the ability to look at the optimal location using LiDAR data to get the optimal location, elevation, and spot for installing your subscriber modules or your CPE, your customer premises equipment that will be at the end of these point to multi-point links. And so C and Heat really is a fantastic job. Additional things we did not talk about today, but this is again topic to come back. Inside building Wi-Fi Designer from Cambium is a tool that we use. And then finally, the thing that sort of brings it all together. Now, these things we're talking about, these are all day zero activities, right? What we've been talking about today is day zero activities. These are things you do before you send somebody on site. It's all your prep work, high efficiency. Day one is your installation day. That's you go out there, guys turn the screws, climb the poles, do the work. And we talked about that. We talked about how the advantages of wireless can be and make speeding up deployment. But really, it's day 2 through day 1,000. Those are the days when the product has been installed, and now you have to manage it. So from Cambium, we put all of these technologies, the fixed wireless broadband, switching, tower switching, industrial rated Ethernet switching, enterprise switching, enterprise Wi-Fi, residential Wi-Fi. And we put all of that under the CN Maestro cloud controller, cloud management entity. And so that's another topic for another day, is to talk about how Cambium brings all of this various technology under one management umbrella. And the thing about cloud, just leave a thought on that. Cloud is up 7/24. Cloud is redundant by design, and cloud never sleeps, but I do. So I thank you guys for your time today on this podcast, and let's do this again because we barely started talking about this.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you very much, Darren, for inviting. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Gino. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. We'll see you.